7 Buddhist Principles. So that nothing can affect you. Buddhism, Buddhist teachings. In a world where chaos, distraction, and emotional storms constantly shake the human mind, Buddhism offers something that few philosophies dare to promise: true inner unshakability. Imagine living in such a way that no insult, no failure, no disappointment, and no loss could disturb your inner calm. Imagine having the strength not to react impulsively, but to respond with wisdom and peace. This is not a fantasy or an unreachable ideal. It is the result of practicing timeless Buddhist principles that have guided awakened beings for over 2,500 years. The Buddha never intended to create a religion built on blind faith. His purpose was much more practical: to teach the art of freedom. Freedom from suffering, from mental agitation, from the illusion that life must conform to our desires. To live so that nothing affects you does not mean indifference, coldness, or detachment from the world. It means living with such depth and clarity that no external force can enslave your peace of mind. It means learning to be still in the middle of the storm. When Siddhartha Gautama sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he was not seeking divine privilege. He was seeking truth, the truth about why we suffer and how to end that suffering. And what he found was not a mystery reserved for monks or mystics. It was a clear understanding of the human mind and its patterns. He discovered that suffering arises not from what happens to us, but from how we relate to what happens. In that insight lies the key to invulnerability. This teaching does not promise that life will stop bringing challenges. On the contrary, the path of awakening accepts impermanence as a fundamental law. Everything that is born will pass away. Everything that arises will dissolve. What changes everything is how we hold these truths in our consciousness. To live with unshakable serenity is to no longer fight against the nature of existence, but to align with it. The principles you are about to explore are not abstract ideas. They are living tools of transformation. They can be practiced by anyone, regardless of religion, culture, or era. Each one of them will lead you closer to the center of your being, where peace is not created, but revealed. In this center, no insult can reach, no tragedy can break, and no fear can survive. Let us walk this path together, slowly and consciously. Let each word be a mirror through which you see your own life. For the purpose of these teachings is not to entertain the intellect, but to awaken the soul. The principle of impermanence: nothing lasts, and that's the source of peace. The first and most fundamental truth that makes nothing able to affect you is the understanding of impermanence. In Pali, it is called anicca, the law that everything in this universe is in constant change. The river never flows the same way twice. Your body is not the same as it was yesterday. Your emotions shift like clouds in a restless sky. To grasp impermanence not merely intellectually, but existentially, is to hold the key to peace. We suffer because we cling to people, possessions, youth, comfort, and even ideas of who we think we are. We build mental walls around things that by their very nature cannot remain the same. And when reality inevitably changes, we call it pain. But in truth, pain is not caused by change itself. It is caused by resistance to change. Imagine the ocean. When you stand on the shore and watch the waves rise and fall, you see that movement is its essence. You would never demand the sea to stay still, and yet we demand that life, which is made of the same fluidity, remains stable for our convenience. We want relationships to last forever, success to be permanent, and our bodies to defy time. But the Buddha taught that attachment to impermanence is the root of sorrow. To live with unshakable serenity, you must stop demanding permanence from what is transient. Every time something changes, every ending, every departure, every loss, there is a deeper truth whispering behind the pain. This, too, is part of the flow. Once you begin to see that everything arises and fades in harmony with a cosmic rhythm, peace takes the place of fear. But understanding impermanence does not mean becoming indifferent. It means learning to love deeply, without clinging. When you look at a flower, you know it will soon wilt, but that does not make it less beautiful. It makes it more precious. You enjoy its fragrance more fully because you know it will not last. This awareness brings gratitude to every moment. When you apply this to life, you stop taking anything for granted. Many people misunderstand impermanence as a source of sadness. They think, if everything changes, then nothing is worth holding on to. But the awakened mind sees it differently. Because everything changes, everything is sacred. Every encounter, every breath, every sunrise becomes a gift. Nothing is repeated, every moment is unique. Meditating on impermanence softens the ego's grip. You begin to see that your pain, your joy, your identity, all of it is flowing like a river. Even suffering, when observed deeply, begins to dissolve. The Buddha said, "All conditioned things are impermanent." When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This insight is not a cold observation, it is liberation. When you stop clinging to what cannot last, you free yourself from the constant cycle of hope and disappointment. You become like the sky, untouched by the clouds that pass through it. The events of life continue to unfold, but they no longer define your inner state. Think about how many times you have said, "I just want this moment to last forever." And yet, if it did, even that moment would become unbearable. Stagnation is not peace, it is death. Life's beauty lies in its movement. The deeper your acceptance of this, the more peaceful you become. The secret, then, is not to escape impermanence, but to align with it. When you meditate, observe your breath. It rises and falls, it comes and goes. The breath itself is a perfect reflection of life's transient nature. If you try to hold your breath, you suffer. But when you let it flow, peace follows naturally. This is the teaching of impermanence in its purest form. If you can learn to watch every moment come and go without grasping, you will no longer be a slave to change. You will see that loss and gain, pleasure and pain, are two sides of the same dance. What disturbs most people is not reality, but their demand that reality conform to their desires. The wise one, however, moves with life instead of against it. To live this principle is to practice non-attachment, not detachment, but non-attachment. Detachment can be cold and distant. Non-attachment is full of love, but free of chains. You can care deeply, but you no longer depend on outcomes for your peace. You can enjoy the world without being consumed by it. When you realize impermanence in your heart, forgiveness becomes natural. You stop holding grudges because you know that anger too will fade. You stop fearing endings because you see that endings are simply beginnings in disguise. Every ending clears the space for something new to be born. The person who understands impermanence walks through life with lightness. They no longer carry the heavy armor of control. They no longer fight against the flow. They trust. They let life move through them, and because of this, nothing can truly shake them. In the words of the Buddha, change is never painful. Only resistance to change is painful. When you embrace impermanence, you no longer resist. You become one with reality. This is the first step toward becoming unshakable. To see that everything you love, everything you fear, everything you believe is in constant transformation, and yet something deeper in you remains untouched. That untouched presence, that silent awareness, is who you truly are. The more you abide in that awareness, the less the external world can affect you. So let your heart be vast like the ocean and your mind clear like the sky. Watch everything come and go without clinging or rejection. This is the way of the wise. If you understand and live this first principle, no loss can destroy you, no change can frighten you, and no passing moment can enslave your peace. Subscribe to the channel for more teachings like this and continue walking the path toward inner freedom and unshakable peace. The principle of mindfulness, mastering the inner witness. The second principle that allows nothing to affect you is mindfulness. To live with unshakable serenity, you must awaken the witness within you, the silent observer who perceives everything yet is not disturbed by anything. This principle, known in Pali as sati, is the heart of Buddhist practice. It is not merely awareness. It is pure attention uncolored by judgment, attachment, or resistance. Through mindfulness, you begin to see life as it truly is, not as your mind imagines it to be. Every experience in life, whether joy or pain, love or loss, arises first in the mind. What you call the world is not a solid, external object, but a living reflection of your consciousness. If your mind is cloudy with fear and craving, everything you see will appear distorted. But when your mind is clear and awake, even the most difficult moments reveal a hidden harmony. Mindfulness is the art of keeping that clarity unbroken. The Buddha taught that mindfulness is the direct path to liberation. It is not a theory, it is a discipline of presence. To be mindful is to bring your full consciousness into this moment, into what is happening now, without trying to change or escape it. Most people are not truly present. Their bodies are here, but their minds are lost in memory or anticipation. They live in yesterday's shadows or tomorrow's illusions, and so they suffer. When you are mindful, you begin to see how your thoughts create your emotional storms. A single memory can make you sad. A single fear can make you anxious. And yet none of these are happening right now. They are echoes, projections of a restless mind. Through mindfulness, you begin to recognize these patterns, and more importantly, you stop identifying with them. You start to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts appear and disappear. Try to observe yourself in a moment of irritation or worry. Watch what happens inside you. You will notice how a thought arises. Perhaps someone said something unkind, or you remembered a mistake. The thought triggers an emotion. The emotion fuels another thought, and soon a whole storm of reaction takes over. But if in that instant you become mindful, if you step back and simply observe the movement without participating, the storm begins to lose power. You realize that you are the sky, not the thunderclouds. This realization is not an intellectual idea, it must be lived. The power of mindfulness lies in direct experience. It transforms not because it adds something new, but because it removes the veil of unconsciousness that clouds perception. When you are aware of every breath, every step, every sensation, you are free from the tyranny of the past and the fear of the future. The present moment becomes your sanctuary. The Buddha often compared the mind to a monkey jumping from branch to branch, never still, never satisfied. Most people spend their lives at the mercy of this monkey mind. They chase desires, resist discomfort, and react to every impulse. But mindfulness trains the mind to rest, to sit quietly and observe its own nature. In that stillness, you begin to see that thoughts are just movements of energy, temporary, impersonal, and empty. When you understand this, you stop believing every story your mind tells. You stop feeding your pain with constant attention. You begin to live in a state of calm lucidity where experiences arise and dissolve without leaving scars. This is what it means to be unaffected by life. There is a deep difference between being passive and being mindful. Passivity is weakness. Mindfulness is mastery. The mindful person does not suppress emotions or ignore reality. They face it directly, but with such presence that even suffering loses its sting. When anger arises, they see it as energy. When sadness comes, they see it as a cloud passing through consciousness. Nothing is rejected, but nothing is clung to either. The miracle of mindfulness is that it transforms everything it touches. When you eat mindfully, food becomes sacred. When you walk mindfully, every step connects you to the earth. When you breathe mindfully, even the act of being alive feels extraordinary. This simple awareness heals the fragmentation that dominates modern life. It reunites body, mind, and spirit into one seamless flow. Consider the difference between a mind that is aware and one that is asleep. The sleeping mind reacts automatically. It repeats old habits of thought. It sees insult and instantly feels hurt, sees failure and instantly feels shame. The aware mind, however, has space. Between the stimulus and the response, there is a gap, a moment of freedom. That gap is mindfulness. It is in that space that true peace exists. To cultivate mindfulness, begin with the breath. The breath is always with you, always now. Sit quietly and feel the rhythm of inhaling and exhaling. Watch it without control, without interference. In the beginning, your mind will wander. It will resist. It will distract you with thoughts of what you must do or what you have done. But gently, patiently, bring it back. Every return strengthens the witness. As this inner observer grows stronger, you begin to carry mindfulness into daily life. When you speak, you are aware of the words forming. When you listen, you are fully present. When you work, you know that you are working. When you rest consciously. You no longer drift through life on autopilot. You live awake. This wakefulness changes everything. Small irritations that once dominated your mood lose their hold. You notice anger beginning to rise, and instead of being consumed by it, you simply watch it unfold. You see how it starts, how it burns, how it fades, and then, with quiet amazement, you realize that the one who observes was never touched by it. That is the true self, the awareness beyond personality. Many people search for peace by trying to control the world. They rearrange circumstances, change relationships, chase new pleasures. But all of these efforts fail because the outer world will never be stable. The only true control lies in awareness. When you control attention, you control your reality. Mindfulness gives you this power, the ability to remain calm in chaos, centered in uncertainty, free in any situation. When the Buddha taught mindfulness, he was not offering a technique for relaxation, he was pointing to liberation. He said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." The lamp is awareness. When it shines, darkness cannot exist. The untrained mind is darkness. It reacts blindly, repeats old suffering, and mistakes illusion for truth. The trained mind illuminates everything with understanding. To be unaffected by the world does not mean you stop feeling. It means you feel everything deeply, but without being possessed by it. You can cry without despair, love without clinging, and lose without collapsing. Mindfulness gives you this strength. It allows you to remain rooted in your center while life moves around you. Think of a mountain surrounded by changing weather. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it shines, sometimes storms rage around it. But the mountain remains unmoved. The mindful person is like that mountain. They observe the seasons of the mind, joy, sorrow, hope, fear, but they are no longer the weather. They are the ground beneath it. In mindfulness, even pain becomes a teacher. When you observe discomfort instead of running from it, you begin to see its impermanent nature. You realize that pain is not the enemy, ignorance is. The more clearly you see pain, the less power it has to control you. The body may suffer, but the mind remains free. One of the most profound teachings of the Buddha is that awareness itself is inherently pure. It is like clear water. Whatever color the glass, the water remains transparent. Thoughts and emotions may cloud it temporarily, but at its core, consciousness is unstained. Mindfulness reconnects you with that purity. To live mindfully is to live as if each breath were your first and your last. You stop rushing through moments as if life were somewhere else. You begin to taste the depth of existence in ordinary things, the sound of the wind, the rhythm of footsteps, the warmth of sunlight, all become gateways to the sacred. When your attention is whole, even the simplest act becomes a meditation. The absence of mindfulness is the true cause of human suffering. It is the state of forgetfulness in which we lose ourselves in the noise of thought. We forget who we are, what we are doing, and why we are alive. We act without awareness, speak without consciousness, and create pain for ourselves and others. The return to mindfulness is the return to sanity. This principle is not limited to meditation cushions or quiet rooms. It must be lived in the marketplace, in conversation, in moments of conflict. The real test of mindfulness is how you act when challenged. When insulted, can you remain aware of your breath? When angry, can you feel the sensations in your body without reacting? When afraid, can you observe fear instead of obeying it? Every such moment is an opportunity for mastery. Gradually, mindfulness begins to dissolve the illusion of me and mine. You start to see that what you call I is just a collection of thoughts and memories appearing in awareness. You realize that awareness itself is not personal, it is universal. It does not belong to you, you belong to it. This recognition brings immense humility and peace. The mind of mindfulness is not tense or forced. It is relaxed, open, and luminous. It does not cling to perfection or reject imperfection. It simply watches with compassionate clarity. That compassion is crucial. Without it, awareness becomes cold observation. With compassion, it becomes healing. You learn to witness yourself not as an enemy, but as a friend. In daily life, this means you stop fighting yourself. When you fail, you notice disappointment, but you do not identify with it. When you succeed, you feel joy, but you do not become arrogant. You move through experiences like a leaf floating on a river, aware of the flow, but never trying to control it. Mindfulness also reveals the interdependence of all things. When you are fully present, you sense that nothing exists in isolation. The air you breathe has passed through countless forms. The food you eat is the result of sun, soil, and rain. You are connected to everything. This understanding erases the illusion of separation, and with it, the loneliness that plagues the human heart. Through mindfulness, compassion naturally awakens. You begin to feel the pain of others as your own, because in truth, there is no other. From this compassion arises wise action. You no longer act from fear or greed, but from understanding. Every gesture, every word becomes an expression of awareness. As your practice deepens, even time begins to lose its grip. The past dissolves into memory, the future into imagination, and only the eternal now remains. In this timeless presence, the world continues to move, but you remain still inside. You become a silent witness to the dance of existence, fully participating, yet untouched. This is the state of unshakable peace the Buddha described. Not the absence of life's challenges, but the end of being ruled by them. When mindfulness becomes your natural state, the distinction between meditation and life disappears. Everything becomes meditation. Walking, eating, speaking, even working. The boundary between sacred and ordinary fades, because awareness makes everything sacred. To live in this way requires constant remembrance. You will forget again and again. The mind will wander, but every time you return, the witness grows stronger. Every time you remember, you are reborn. Slowly, you begin to live not as a collection of reactions, but as consciousness itself. There will come a moment when you're sitting quietly, and suddenly you realize that even your effort to be mindful has dissolved. Awareness is simply there, effortless, luminous, all-encompassing. In that moment, there is no meditator and no object of meditation. There is only pure being. From that state, nothing can affect you, because there is no you left to be affected. Mindfulness is not something to achieve. It is something to remember. You were born with it. A child watching a butterfly, a bird singing or rain falling is naturally mindful. Life itself taught you to forget. The journey of practice is simply the journey of remembering. When you live with mindfulness, suffering cannot take root. You still feel the waves of experience, but you no longer drown in them. The mind remains vast and open, like the ocean, accepting everything without resistance. And in that vastness, peace blooms effortlessly. So let this be your second step toward unshakability. Return to the present again and again. Watch your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, without trying to fix or fight them. Be the witness. In that witnessing lies your freedom. Subscribe to the channel to continue learning these timeless Buddhist principles and strengthen your practice of inner peace and awareness every day. The principle of non-attachment, freedom from the chains of desire. To live in a state where nothing can truly affect you, you must understand and practice the principle of non-attachment. If mindfulness gives you the clarity to observe life as it unfolds, non-attachment gives you the freedom to move through it without being enslaved by its ups and downs. This principle is not about rejecting life or refusing to care. It is about caring deeply while remaining inwardly free. It's the art of possessing nothing, even while surrounded by everything. The Buddha observed that craving, tanha, is the root of all suffering. Desire itself is not the enemy, but attachment to desire is. When you believe that your happiness depends on obtaining or keeping something, wealth, recognition, love, youth, control, you hand your peace over to conditions that can never remain constant. Life changes, people leave, things decay, and time takes back everything it lends. The person who clings suffers twice, first when they fear losing what they love, and again when they inevitably lose it. Non-attachment is not apathy. It is understanding the difference between love and clinging, between appreciation and dependency. When you love with attachment, you try to possess. When you love without attachment, you allow freedom. The flower is more beautiful when it is not caged. When you cling, fear is born. You fear losing, you fear change, and in that fear you close your heart. Non-attachment opens it again. To practice non-attachment is to live in the middle of the world, yet remain untouched by it. It is to walk among desires but not be owned by them. You can enjoy pleasure without becoming addicted, and endure pain without being broken. The truly free person is not the one who has nothing, but the one who needs nothing to be at peace. Look around you. Everything you can see, touch, or think about is transient. The body ages, possessions wear out, relationships evolve, and yet we build our identities upon these impermanent foundations. We say, my house, my career, my reputation, my partner, and in doing so we create a fragile sense of self that trembles with every change. But when you see that nothing truly belongs to you, not even your body, you begin to relax. You stop fighting against loss because you understand that nothing was ever truly yours to lose. The Buddha compared life to holding water in your hands. If you hold it too tightly, it slips away. But if you cup your hands gently, you can hold it for a while and appreciate its coolness. Non-attachment is that gentle holding. It allows you to engage fully with life while knowing it is temporary. It allows you to love without fear. Consider how much energy we spend chasing after what we want. The mind is constantly reaching, wanting a different job, a better partner, more money, more respect, a new experience. It moves endlessly from one desire to another, believing that the next achievement will finally bring contentment. But as soon as one goal is reached, another arises. This is the endless wheel of craving, the samsara of modern existence. Non-attachment is the only way to step off that wheel. This does not mean you stop acting or dreaming. It means you act without being bound by the outcome. You give your best, but you do not demand that life bend to your will. You learn to flow instead of forcing. In this way, success and failure become equal teachers. When you are praised, you smile. When you are criticized, you learn. Nothing disturbs your inner equilibrium. In the practice of meditation, you can observe attachment directly. Sit quietly and notice how the mind clings even to pleasant sensations. When you feel peaceful, the mind says, I want to keep this. And the moment that desire arises, the peace is lost. The grasping destroys the very thing it tries to hold. The same is true in life. When you try to control happiness, you strangle it. When you let it flow, it stays longer because it is free. Attachment is subtle. It hides behind noble masks. Even the wish to be enlightened can become an attachment. The mind says, I want awakening, and turns the path into another object of craving. But true freedom comes not from gaining something, but from letting go of everything. The enlightened person has not added anything new. They have dropped all illusions of ownership. When you understand non-attachment, gratitude arises naturally. You no longer take things for granted because you know they can vanish at any moment. You appreciate beauty without the urge to possess it. You are grateful for love, even if it is brief. You thank life for each sunrise, knowing that tomorrow may not come. In this awareness, every experience becomes sacred. Non-attachment also transforms relationships. Most human love is a mixture of affection and fear, the fear of loss, rejection, or betrayal. When you love with attachment, you project expectations onto others. You want them to behave a certain way, to fulfill your needs, to never change. But when they inevitably fail to meet your imagined standards, pain follows. Non-attachment liberates both you and them. You love without demanding. You allow the other person to be free, and in that freedom, love deepens. Imagine a bird resting on your hand. If you try to hold it, it struggles and may fly away. But if you keep your hand open, it might choose to stay. Love is like that. Non-attachment keeps the hand open. To practice this principle, begin by observing your dependencies. Notice the small ways in which your peace depends on circumstances. Perhaps your mood rises and falls with other people's opinions, or you feel restless without your phone, or you cannot be still unless things go your way. Each dependency is a chain. See it clearly. Do not judge yourself. Just observe. Awareness is the first act of freedom. Next, practice letting go in small ways. When you are attached to a plan, allow it to change without resistance. When you lose something, see it as a test of freedom. When someone disappoints you, ask yourself, am I suffering because of what they did, or because I expected them to be different? You will discover that almost all suffering is self-created through attachment to expectations. Non-attachment does not make you indifferent, it makes you compassionate. When you are no longer blinded by personal desires, you can see others more clearly. You listen without agenda. You help without pride. You love without fear. The ego always says, "What do I gain?" Non-attachment asks, "What does love need now?" This freedom also changes how you deal with loss. Death, separation, and failure no longer devastate you. Of course, you may feel sadness. Buddhism never denies human emotion, but sadness passes through you like wind through trees. It does not break you. You understand that behind every ending lies transformation. What dies in one form continues in another. When you stop clinging to outcomes, life begins to flow effortlessly. You make decisions with clarity, not desperation. You enjoy work for its own sake, not for recognition. You share kindness without expecting anything in return. This detachment creates space for real joy, the kind that does not depend on conditions. Modern society often confuses attachment with passion. People fear that if they let go, they will become passive or lose motivation. But the truth is the opposite. When you act without attachment, your actions become purer and more powerful. They arise from clarity, not from compulsion. The archer who is obsessed with hitting the target trembles with anxiety and misses. The archer who simply draws the bow with full attention hits naturally because there is no interference from fear or desire. The same applies to life. When you act freely, you perform better because your mind is not divided. You are not consumed by what if or I must. You are simply present, giving your best to the moment. Success or failure no longer defines you. This is the essence of non-attachment in action. Even spiritual pride can become a form of attachment. You may start thinking, I am more advanced, I am more peaceful, I am more spiritual. The ego grows subtler, but it still clings to identity. True non-attachment is the absence of even this need to be someone. The highest freedom is anonymity, to be nothing and everything at once. The Buddha once said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. This teaching applies to every form of clinging. When you hold on to resentment, you burn. When you hold on to possessions, you fear their loss. When you hold on to beliefs, you close your mind to truth. Letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is recognizing that the coal was never worth the pain. Through meditation, you can directly experience this letting go. Sit quietly and imagine releasing everything you identify with, your name, your story, your desires, your fears. One by one, set them down as if laying burdens on the ground. Notice that something remains, the pure awareness that observes. That awareness cannot be lost because it was never owned. It is your true nature, beyond attachment. As your understanding deepens, you may begin to see that even happiness and sadness are waves on the same ocean. The mind likes to chase one and reject the other, but both are transient. Non-attachment means allowing the full range of experience without clinging to pleasure or running from pain. When pleasure comes, enjoy it. When it fades, let it go. When pain comes, face it. When it passes, bow to its teaching. In this way, every moment becomes your guru. One of the greatest misconceptions is that letting go means giving up everything you love. In reality, it means loving without fear. You can still have dreams, relationships, and goals, but they no longer own you. You live in the world as a free being. When things come, you welcome them. When they leave, you bless them. Your heart remains open because it is not guarded by attachment. In the natural world, nothing clings. Trees shed leaves, rivers flow to the sea, the sun sets each evening without regret. Only humans resist this rhythm, but the more you align yourself with nature's way of letting go, the more peaceful you become. Life becomes a dance instead of a struggle. Non-attachment also dissolves the illusion of control. You begin to see that much of life is beyond your will. People change, events unfold, the body ages. When you stop demanding that life obey you, frustration vanishes. You act wisely where you can, and you surrender where you cannot. This balance between effort and surrender is the middle path, the heart of the Buddha's wisdom. Every time you release an attachment, you feel lighter. Something in you opens. A new spaciousness appears inside your chest. That space is peace. In that space, even chaos cannot disturb you. The outer world may still fluctuate, but inside you there is silence, vast and unshaken. To practice non-attachment daily, start with small moments. When you notice yourself grasping at a thought, a feeling, a person, pause and breathe. Ask, can I let this be as it is? You do not have to push anything away. Just stop feeding it. The moment you stop fueling attachment with attention, it weakens naturally. Gradually, this attitude spreads to every area of life. You stop arguing with reality. You stop demanding that people act according to your script. You stop believing that your worth depends on success or approval. You become inwardly independent, even in the middle of society. You can participate fully, love deeply, work passionately, and yet remain free. Non-attachment is not a philosophy to admire. It is a practice to live. It begins with awareness of clinging and ends with the joy of release. When you truly let go, you realize that nothing essential can ever be taken from you. What you lose are only illusions. What remains is truth. In the silence of non-attachment, compassion blossoms. You see others trapped in the same nets of desire and fear that once bound you. You no longer judge, you understand. You wish freedom for everyone. This compassion is not pity, it is love without conditions. You become like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, radiating peace simply by being. When nothing owns you, nothing can break you. The mind becomes like a clear lake, reflecting the sky. Disturbances may ripple its surface, but its depth remains calm. That depth is your true self. To live from that depth is to live untouched by fortune or misfortune. So the third principle is to let go, to drop your invisible chains. Each chain you break reveals more of your natural joy. And as you walk lighter through the world, you discover that the very freedom you were chasing was within you all along. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of awakening and learn the next timeless Buddhist principles that lead to complete inner freedom and peace. The principle of equanimity, the unshakable balance of the mind. There comes a point on the spiritual path when the storms of emotion no longer toss you around, when praise and blame sound the same in your heart, and when joy and sorrow pass through you like wind through an open window. This state is not indifference, it is equanimity. To be untouched by life does not mean you stop feeling. It means you feel everything, but nothing owns you. You remain like the mountain that stands still while the clouds drift past. The Buddha called this serenity upekkha, the balanced mind that sees all things clearly and responds with wisdom instead of reaction. Equanimity is not something that happens by chance. It is the result of long cultivation. It grows from the deep understanding that life is a play of opposites. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain, birth and death, all dance together in endless rhythm. When you identify with one side of the dance, you suffer when the other inevitably appears. The secret of peace is not to cling to one pole, but to see both as part of the same harmony. The Buddha saw that suffering begins when we divide life into what we like and what we dislike. The wise person transcends this duality. To live with equanimity is to see with eyes that do not judge, a heart that does not tremble, and a mind that does not grasp. It is to live at the center of the circle instead of being pulled by its spinning edges. Most people are dragged by the momentum of desire and aversion. They chase pleasure and run from pain, but in this chasing, they never rest. Equanimity allows rest. It brings you back to the middle, the still point where nothing disturbs your peace because you have ceased to prefer one half of existence over the other. In the teachings of the Buddha, equanimity is one of the highest perfections, one that even compassion and mindfulness depend upon. Without balance, compassion becomes sentimental and mindfulness becomes fragile. The balanced mind can love without exhaustion, serve without pride, and endure without complaint. It is the mind that remains calm when others are in chaos, that stands like a tree in the wind, flexible yet deeply rooted. To understand equanimity, you must first see how the mind loses it. Notice how quickly your mood shifts in response to external events. A compliment makes you happy, a criticism makes you angry. Success inflates you, failure deflates you. Someone praises you and you smile, someone ignores you and you doubt yourself. This is the ordinary mind, a puppet whose strings are pulled by circumstances. The practice of equanimity is the art of cutting those strings one by one until your peace no longer depends on anything outside yourself. When you are free from attachment to outcomes, you can finally act from wisdom rather than emotion. Most people act not because they choose to, but because they are pushed by impulses. The equanimous person, however, acts consciously. They are not numb, they are awake. When joy arises, they welcome it without clinging. When sorrow comes, they bow to it without resistance. They treat both as guests who come and go. Imagine a perfectly still lake high in the mountains. When the wind blows, ripples form. But when the wind stops, the surface returns to calm. The lake never loses its depth, never loses its clarity. That is the mind of equanimity. The world may send storms, but the depth of awareness remains untouched. The waves of thought and emotion no longer define you. Equanimity is sometimes misunderstood as indifference, but the two are opposites. Indifference is cold. It is born of avoidance. Equanimity is warm. It is born of understanding. The indifferent person turns away from suffering to protect themselves. The equanimous person turns towards suffering with compassion, but without being consumed by it. They can be fully present with pain and yet remain peaceful because they see beyond it. In daily life, equanimity means you no longer fight the way things are. You stop arguing with reality. You understand that everything unfolds according to causes and conditions. People act from their conditioning, events arise from countless factors, and much of it is beyond your control. When you see this clearly, frustration melts. You still care, you still act, but you do not demand that life obey your personal script. You trust the unfolding. This trust does not come easily. The ego fears uncertainty and craves control, but equanimity grows each time you surrender the illusion of control. You begin to notice that life often flows better when you stop forcing. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Equanimity is precisely this inner peace. It is the ability to remain centered in yourself, regardless of what happens outside. Consider how people react when life doesn't go as planned. One person collapses in despair, another grows angry and blames others, yet another takes it as an opportunity to learn. The event is the same, the difference lies in the mind. Equanimity transforms experience not by changing the event, but by changing your relationship to it. When you accept reality as it is, suffering loses its grip. Meditation is the training ground for equanimity. As you sit in silence, sensations rise and fall. The body itches, the legs ache, thoughts swirl, emotions surface. The untrained mind reacts to every sensation, scratching, shifting, judging. The equanimous mind observes without reaction. It sees pleasure and pain as equal waves of experience. In that observation, a miracle occurs. The waves begin to calm on their own. The more deeply you observe, the less you are moved. Through this practice, you begin to realize that emotions are not permanent visitors. They come, they stay for a while, and they leave. Anger burns, then cools. Fear tightens, then relaxes. Joy rises, then fades. When you stop fighting them, they move through you faster. This is the natural intelligence of the mind returning to balance. Equanimity also teaches you humility. You begin to see that you are not in charge of the universe. The sun rises without your permission. The seasons change without your command. You cannot control the thoughts that arise or the aging of your body. You can only choose how to relate to them. This humility opens the heart. It frees you from the burden of trying to manage what cannot be managed. In equanimity, forgiveness becomes effortless. You understand that others act from their own suffering, just as you once did. When someone harms you, you see that they are driven by ignorance, fear, or pain. This does not mean you allow injustice, but you respond with clarity instead of hatred. Hatred only deepens the wound. Equanimity lets you respond from wisdom instead of revenge. When you cultivate equanimity, life no longer feels like a battle. The ups and downs that once exhausted you become waves that you ride with grace. You still experience joy and pain, but they no longer define you. They pass through the vastness of your awareness like clouds through the sky. You begin to sense something timeless within you, a stillness that has always been there. That stillness is your true self. The Buddha described equanimity as one of the 4 divine abidings, along with loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. Together, they form the foundation of enlightened living. Loving kindness opens the heart. Compassion connects you to others. Joy celebrates goodness wherever it appears. Equanimity keeps them all balanced. Without equanimity, love can turn into attachment, compassion into burnout, and joy into craving. Equanimity is the guardrail that keeps all virtues pure. As you deepen this practice, you will find that even your sense of time changes. You no longer rush toward the future or dwell in the past. You live more fully in each moment because you are not resisting it. You trust that everything is unfolding as it should. This trust gives birth to serenity, a quiet confidence in life itself. In the modern world, where everything pulls your attention outward, equanimity is revolutionary. It is saying no to emotional slavery. It is refusing to be ruled by news, social media, praise, or blame. It is reclaiming your right to peace. The world may spin faster and faster, but you can still sit like the Buddha, silent, grounded, radiant. Equanimity also transforms your relationships. When you no longer react to others' moods, you stop adding fuel to conflict. You listen without defensiveness, speak without aggression, and forgive more easily. You begin to see that everyone is fighting their own internal storms. Instead of demanding that they change, you offer them the calmness of your own presence. Your peace becomes a refuge for others. To practice equanimity, start by noticing how the mind labels experiences as good or bad. Every time you catch yourself saying, "I like this," or "I hate that," pause. Ask yourself, is it truly good or bad, or is it just my mind's reaction? Most of what disturbs us is not the event itself, but the story we tell about it. When you see this clearly, you begin to loosen the mind's grip on duality. The path to equanimity is gradual. It begins with awareness of imbalance. Then, with gentle practice, the extremes begin to soften. You start to catch yourself before reacting. You breathe instead of lashing out. You listen instead of defending. These small acts of balance, repeated again and again, shape the mind into a vessel of serenity. There will still be moments when the storm overwhelms you. The old habits will return. But even then, do not judge yourself. Simply notice, the mind is agitated right now. That awareness itself is already equanimity beginning to return. Each time you recognize imbalance, you strengthen your ability to return to stillness. The goal is not to become a rock without feeling, but to become the ocean that can contain every wave. You can laugh, cry, love and lose, yet remain free. You can move through sorrow with dignity and through joy with humility. Nothing sticks to you because you have become transparent to experience. In the depths of equanimity, you realize that everything is teaching you. Every gain tests your humility. Every loss tests your faith. Every insult tests your patience. Every praise tests your ego. When you can accept both without losing your center, you have mastered yourself. One of the most profound effects of equanimity is the disappearance of fear. Fear lives in the future. It is always about what might happen. But the equanimous mind lives in the present. It meets each moment fully, without resistance, and therefore has nothing to fear. Even death loses its terror, because you see it as another transformation in the endless cycle of change. When you look at the Buddha statues around the world, notice the expression on the face, serene, compassionate, untroubled. That expression is the reflection of equanimity. It is not the smile of someone who has escaped the world, but of someone who has embraced it completely. He has seen through its illusions and found peace in its impermanence. Equanimity does not mean you stop caring about justice or goodness. It means you act for them, without hatred, without pride, and without despair. You work for what is right because it is right, not because you need a particular outcome. This gives your actions immense power. You become like a tree that bears fruit simply because it is its nature to do so. Over time, you begin to notice that external events lose their power to disturb you. The weather changes, the markets rise and fall, people come and go, but inside, a steady flame burns. That flame is awareness illuminated by wisdom. It cannot be extinguished by fortune or misfortune. When you live from equanimity, even pleasure is experienced differently. You enjoy it without fear of losing it. You know it will pass, and that knowledge deepens your gratitude. Pain, too, is seen differently. You no longer resist it or dramatize it. You observe it, learn from it, and let it pass. Everything becomes part of the same sacred movement of life. This balance of mind brings immense joy, not the noisy joy of excitement, but the quiet joy of being at home in the universe. It is the peace of a heart that has stopped demanding that life be other than it is. It is the freedom of one who has nothing to prove, nothing to protect, and nothing to fear. Equanimity is not an escape from life. It is life lived fully, but from the deepest center. It is the realization that nothing external can disturb the inner peace of one who has understood reality. The waves may rise, but the depth of the ocean remains calm. As this understanding deepens, you may find that the distinction between meditation and daily life disappears. Washing dishes, driving, talking, all become expressions of balance. You are no longer split between doing and being. Every act becomes a form of meditation, every breath a prayer of peace. To cultivate equanimity, remember often, this too will pass. When something pleasant arises, whisper it. When something painful arises, whisper it again. This simple remembrance loosens the mind's grip on extremes. You begin to see the impermanent nature of all things, and with that vision comes peace. Ultimately, equanimity is not a state you create. It is what remains when the storms of attachment and aversion have settled. It is the natural stillness of your being, revealed when you stop fighting reality. It is the ground beneath all experiences, always present, always unshaken. To live in equanimity is to live as the Buddha lived, awake, compassionate, and free. You no longer seek safety in things, people, or beliefs. You have found it in yourself. The mind that was once tossed by every wave now rests in the ocean of awareness. Nothing can move it, because it is one with the movement of all things. So let this be your practice. Stay centered in the middle of life's opposites. Welcome both joy and sorrow as teachers. Accept gain and loss as natural. Love without clinging. Work without anxiety. Rest without guilt. Let everything come and go in the vastness of your awareness. Then you will know what it means to live so that nothing can affect you, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey and discover the next principle, the one that reveals the deepest strength of all, the power of compassion and wisdom united in the awakened heart. The principle of compassion and wisdom, the heart that cannot be broken. There is a moment on the path of awakening when the mind becomes clear, the body becomes still, and the heart begins to open in a way that feels boundless. This opening is compassion, the pure natural response of an awakened being to the suffering of all life. It is not a sentimental emotion, nor a reaction born of guilt or pity. It is the spontaneous movement of love that arises from understanding. When wisdom and compassion unite, a human being becomes unshakable, not because they are untouched by pain, but because their love is larger than pain itself. The Buddha said that wisdom and compassion are like the two wings of a bird. Without both, the bird cannot fly. Wisdom without compassion becomes cold and detached. Compassion without wisdom becomes blind and exhausting. But when they merge, they form a perfect balance, the clarity to see reality as it is, and the love to embrace it fully. Together, they create a heart that nothing can break, because it beats in harmony with the rhythm of all existence. To understand compassion, we must first understand suffering. The Buddha's first noble truth is that suffering exists, not as punishment, but as a teacher. When you see your own suffering clearly, when you stop running from it and instead look deeply into its roots, something miraculous happens. The wall that separates you from others begins to dissolve. You realize that everyone suffers in the same way, through desire, through fear, through loss. You begin to feel the humanity of every being, and from that realization, compassion is born. True compassion begins with yourself. Many people mistake spirituality for self-denial. They think being kind to others means ignoring their own wounds. But self-compassion is the foundation of all compassion. If you cannot hold your own pain with tenderness, you will unconsciously project it onto others. When you turn inward and meet your own suffering with patience and care, you begin to heal. The heart that heals itself becomes capable of healing others. Imagine sitting quietly and watching your own pain arise. Instead of rejecting it, you simply breathe with it. You whisper inwardly, "It's okay, I see you." You allow it to exist without judgment. Gradually, you feel it softening, as if a frozen part of you has begun to melt. That melting is compassion. It does not come from effort. It comes from presence. The moment you stop trying to escape your pain, love begins to flow again, and that love naturally extends to others, because once you have seen your own wounds clearly, you recognize them in everyone. Wisdom deepens this compassion. Wisdom sees that suffering arises from ignorance, from the belief that we are separate, isolated selves moving through a hostile world. Compassion sees that this belief is the source of all pain, and responds not with anger, but with understanding. When you see someone acting cruelly or selfishly, wisdom recognizes that they are driven by confusion. Compassion responds not with hate, but with empathy. This person is suffering, they do not yet see the truth. This understanding transforms your relationship with the world. You stop fighting people and start addressing the ignorance within them and within yourself. When wisdom and compassion work together, forgiveness becomes effortless. You no longer need to carry the heavy burden of resentment. You see that holding hatred is like drinking poison and waiting for another to die. Compassion teaches you to release that poison. Forgiveness is not about excusing harm. It is about freeing yourself from its grip. When you forgive, you are not saying, "What you did was right." You are saying, "I choose not to let your actions imprison my heart." This is freedom, the freedom that no external force can take away. In Buddhist teachings, the Bodhisattva represents the embodiment of this union between wisdom and compassion. The Bodhisattva is one who has realized enlightenment but chooses to remain in the world to help others awaken. They see no separation between self and other. The suffering of one is the suffering of all. To live with the heart of a bodhisattva is to live with an open, fearless love, to look at the world's pain and say, "I will not turn away." Such compassion does not mean you become a martyr or neglect your own boundaries. True compassion includes discernment. It knows when to say yes and when to say no. It acts wisely, not impulsively. Compassion guided by wisdom does not indulge harmful behavior, but seeks to transform it. It is like a surgeon's hand, firm and precise, cutting only to heal. When you live from this union, even the ordinary moments of life become sacred. You look at a stranger and feel connected. You hear the cry of a bird and feel tenderness. You see a tree swaying in the wind and recognize your own breath moving in harmony with it. You realize that compassion is not something you do. It is what you are when you are free of illusion. The awakened heart is not selective. It embraces everything. But the journey to this heart is not easy. The ego resists it. It fears vulnerability because to love deeply means to expose yourself to pain. Yet paradoxically, it is this very openness that makes you invincible. The heart that closes to avoid pain also closes to joy. The heart that opens, even if it breaks, expands beyond all limits. When the Buddha spoke of enlightenment, he did not describe a cold detachment. He described a state of boundless compassion, a love so vast that no suffering could destroy it. Compassion transforms how you relate to the world. When someone insults you, instead of reacting with anger, you pause. You see that their words are coming from their own suffering. You might still feel the sting, but you respond with understanding rather than retaliation. When someone succeeds, instead of feeling envy, you rejoice for them, knowing that their joy adds to the collective well-being of all. When you see someone struggling, you offer kindness without expecting gratitude. You give because giving feels natural, like breathing. In a society built on competition, compassion is revolutionary. It dismantles the illusion of separateness that drives greed and conflict. When you look into another's eyes and truly see them, not as a role, not as an opponent, but as another expression of life, you begin to act differently. You speak more gently. You listen more deeply. You stop trying to win and start trying to understand. The power of compassion is subtle but unstoppable. It transforms without violence, heals without force. The mind of compassion is vast like the sky. It can contain all emotions without being overwhelmed. You can grieve for the world's suffering and still see its beauty. You can face injustice and still believe in goodness. Compassion does not require perfection, it requires presence. Even when you fail, even when you lose patience, you can return to compassion in the next moment. Each return is a victory. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, ripples through the universe in ways you cannot measure. Wisdom gives compassion its direction. It reminds you that not every pain can or should be avoided, and not every comfort is beneficial. Sometimes love must be fierce, like a storm that clears the sky. Sometimes compassion must say no. Without wisdom, compassion becomes indulgence. Without compassion, wisdom becomes cruelty. Together, they create balance, the same balance that sustains all of nature. You can cultivate compassion through meditation. Sit quietly and imagine someone you love. Wish them well. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be free from suffering. Then extend this wish to someone neutral, someone you barely know. Then to someone difficult, someone who has hurt you, and finally to all beings everywhere. This practice softens the heart. It dissolves the boundaries that the mind creates. Over time, you feel a warmth spreading inside you, a quiet joy that comes from knowing you are part of something infinite. But compassion must also be lived, not only felt. The true measure of compassion is how you treat others when it is inconvenient to do so. It is easy to be kind when it costs nothing. The real test is whether you can remain kind when you are tired, hurt, or ignored. The Buddha said that one moment of genuine compassion is more powerful than years of empty rituals. Because compassion touches the essence, it reminds you and others that we are not alone. As compassion grows, fear begins to dissolve. Fear is the contraction of the heart. Compassion is its expansion. When you open your heart to the suffering of others, you realize that there is nothing to protect. The walls of the ego crumble, and with them, the constant anxiety of self-preservation. You become fearless, not because you are invincible, but because you are no longer separate. You live as part of the whole, and the whole cannot be harmed. Wisdom refines this fearlessness. It teaches you that everything in life is interconnected. Every word, every action has consequences that echo far beyond what you can see. When you act from compassion, those echoes bring healing. When you act from greed or anger, they bring suffering. Understanding this makes you mindful of every thought and deed. You become a conscious participant in the web of existence, a caretaker of life itself. The compassionate and wise person is like a lamp in the darkness. They do not preach or impose, they simply shine. Their presence calms others because it radiates peace. People feel safe around them, not because the world has changed, but because they embody a different way of being. This is the quiet power of awakening. It transforms through example, not argument. At the highest level, compassion and wisdom dissolve the distinction between self and other completely. You see that helping others is helping yourself, because there is no separation. You understand that when one being suffers, the whole fabric of existence trembles, and when one being awakens, the entire universe brightens. This understanding gives life profound meaning. Every action, no matter how small, becomes sacred because it participates in the awakening of all. To live in this way is to walk the path of the Buddha, not as an imitation, but as a realization of your own potential. The Buddha is not outside you. The Buddha nature is your own true heart. It awakens each time you choose understanding over judgment, kindness over anger, wisdom over ignorance. The path is not about becoming something new. It is about remembering who you already are when all illusions fall away. When compassion and wisdom unite, you become like a mirror, reflecting all things without distortion. You see beauty and ugliness, joy and sorrow, and you do not turn away from either. You hold the world in your awareness without needing to fix it, because you trust the intelligence of life itself. This trust brings an indescribable peace, a peace that survives every storm because it is rooted in love, not control. The compassionate heart cannot be broken because it does not belong to one person. It belongs to life. It beats through every living being, through every breath, through every act of kindness and forgiveness. When you realize this, you no longer feel small or alone. You are part of something eternal. You can lose everything and still be whole, because wholeness does not depend on possession. It depends on love. There will still be moments of pain. Compassion does not shield you from them. It makes you strong enough to face them. You will still grieve when someone dies, still feel sorrow when the world suffers. But now that sorrow is not despair. It is love in motion. It is the natural tenderness of a heart that knows it is connected to all. You weep, and your tears become prayers. You smile, and your joy becomes healing. Everything you do becomes an offering. This union of compassion and wisdom is the final key to living so that nothing can affect you. Because when your heart is vast enough to include everything, there is nothing left to defend. You stop fighting life. You stop fearing loss. You see that everything you give returns to you, multiplied through the joy of others. The universe itself becomes your home. To live this truth is the greatest blessing. It means you can walk through fire and still sing. You can see cruelty and still believe in goodness. You can face death and still celebrate life. For you have discovered that love is stronger than fear, and wisdom is brighter than despair. You have found the unshakable peace that no circumstance can destroy. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love." This is the eternal law. That love is compassion born of wisdom, the love that understands. It is not personal, it does not choose sides, it does not tire. It flows endlessly because it comes from the infinite source within. When you touch that source, you realize you were never broken, never separate, never alone. So walk this path with courage, cultivate wisdom to see clearly and compassion to act rightly. Together, they will make you unbreakable. The storms of life will still come, but you will stand, as the mountain does, strong, steady, and full of light. You will move through the world not as a victim of circumstances, but as a presence of peace. When wisdom and compassion fill your being, even silence becomes a teaching. Your life itself becomes a blessing to everyone you meet. You no longer need to preach the truth. You embody it. You no longer seek peace. You are peace. The Buddha's smile, the calm, knowing smile carved into statues for centuries, is born in you. It is the smile of one who has seen everything, lost everything, loved everything, and remains free. And in that freedom, you discover the deepest truth of all, that the only thing that was ever real, the only thing that ever mattered, was love guided by wisdom. Everything else was just a passing wave. Subscribe to the channel to continue learning, reflecting, and walking the path of awakening, where wisdom, compassion, and peace become not just ideas, but the living reality of your everyday life.